Right now, we're just getting all the shots ready. All the audio seems good right now. We've got with us today Dr. Susan. Dr. Susan sounds better. It's like, Dr. Susan, I'm going to help and heal you right now. Dr. Susan Nash, she's with us today.
You can't count on me to do that. That's Dr. Kozhi's job.
And we have Dr. Kozhi Makai. It is Makai, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And he's joining us today. We're going to talk about leadership today and other things. Should be very interesting. And are you from Zimbabwe originally?
Zambia, actually.
Zambia, okay.
Most people know Zimbabwe, but I'm actually from Zambia.
Zambia. That's good. Well, I think we are good. Are you guys ready?
Definitely.
So what we're going to do is we're going to start the show on this shot. We will talk for maybe a minute or so. We will run an intro. And then at that point, Susan will introduce you. And we'll start the actual interview. So are we all ready then?
Sounds excellent.
Ready? What are we doing? Oh, we're going to get rid of a pop-up on your machine, Susan. Skype. It's the Mac. It's got a little pop-up. Uh-oh.
Okay.
Wait a minute. What happened? There we go. Got you back.
This shot looks really strange from my perspective. It looks really strange. It's all skewed to the side. Kozhi, how does it look on yours? Okay, that's better.
Yeah, my side looks a little tilted too.
It is. It's not actually here, but what happened is we have a webcam pointing at a TV. That's going to change in about a week with some new technology, but right now we couldn't get the video signal back into the Macs. There you look pretty good, right?
Thank you.
It's just that when we go into this shot, it looks like you're cut off. You're actually not. Well, that's not too bad.
Well, no,
I think
what she was talking about is her camera was.
And
her camera was.
There's a glare on my screen, but I don't know if it's showing.
I think there's really not much glare. I think it's just maybe what you're seeing from the webcam.
Reflection.
The webcam is picking a little bit of our lights up. Here, let me show you. This is.
It looks like the kind of shots that you see when they're like spirits.
See, this is our back shot. If you can see here. So we're looking at two different TVs, and there's a light right in front of me, and what's happening is a little bit of that is hitting into the TV to my right, and that's what you're seeing, a little bit of a glow, but it's not coming on the real shot.
Well, that's good, because I'm seeing little speckles of light that look exactly like the types of things that you see when there are haunted houses.
Well, you never know. You may be haunted right now. All right, let's get going. So we are going to run the show about a half hour, and I will keep track of time as we're going. And let me get my little high-end studio clock. This actually works beautifully. Our studio clock works like a champ. Okay.
Excellent.
So we should be finished about your time about 5:45, about 6:15. We should be done.
Excellent.
Okie dokie. So let's start on this shot. Intro is queued up. And we're going to start the show recording in 3, 2, and 1. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Lecture. Oh, let's start over. Oh, that's a long day. Sorry. I've got too many shows on my mind. Too many L's on these shows. Here we go again. Starting the show recording in 3, 2, and 1. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Life Edge. Because life just doesn't have to be mediocre. Joining me today is our lovely co-host, the one, the only, Dr. Susan Nash. Hi, Susan. How are you today?
Great. I'm thrilled to be here. It's a beautiful day. How's the weather there?
You know, we are having absolutely gorgeous Southern California weather, 72 all week so far. So, and at night, we've been almost in the 30s a couple of times, which is weird. But
that's nice.
No complaints. No complaints. Well, we have a great guest today. Shall we do our intro first?
Absolutely.
Here we go. are back. Susan, we've got a very interesting guest today. And we're going to talk about leadership, among other subjects. Would you love to introduce him?
I would. We have a wonderful guest, Dr. Kozhi Sidney Makai. And again, he's an expert in organizational behavior and leadership. And I'm really thrilled to have the chance to talk to you, Dr. Kozhi. and I'd like to, I don't know if you don't mind me calling you that, I think it sounds really good. And I wanted to talk to you a little bit about your background. So welcome.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you having me on the show.
We appreciate you coming on.
I'd like to start by asking you to tell us a little bit about your background and some of the things that led to your philosophy of life.
Well, I think it all begins in clarifying specifically where I'm from. I always see myself as just a farm boy who grew up in Zambia. Zambia is right in between Zimbabwe and Congo. And so I grew up in a family of 9, 2 sisters, 6 brothers, a mother who was an entrepreneur, and my father worked in the government. So education was a huge part of the way we were raised. We were required to excel in our academics. I was fortunate to excel both in my academics as well as in athletics. But I was very fortunate to go to a wonderful school, Lake Road PTA School for high school. And that was probably the defining moment for me as an academic as well as an athlete. Ended up playing basketball professionally in Zambia, playing for the national team, and that led to an opportunity for me to move to Houston, hoping to play basketball at the University of Houston. But instead I got an academic scholarship, and as they say, the rest is history. My interest in leadership started in sports, and then I took an academic interest, and that moved into a scholar practitioner role, which I'm in right now.
Oh, that's really fascinating. And I'm fascinated, too, by the background that you have. You said that your mother is an entrepreneur. In what areas?
My mother barely finished 9th grade, but just very, very driven, but amazing person when it came to building relationships. She had the most and continues to have some of the most amazing relationships with vendors and so on. So she was a restaurateur. She sold her restaurant, but continued to run farms. And so she's basically a produce person. So she had a distribution company that took care of produce for the State House, the equivalent of our White House here in the U.S., the Police Academy, and lots of other locations where she provided fresh fruit and vegetables. And so between running the farms themselves that had a poultry, taking care of eggs and so forth, and we also had a dairy, she also got fresh fruit and vegetables from other vendors and then supplied her own clients.
Oh, that's really impressive. And so you got to see firsthand leadership in action and the different types of leadership. In the case of your mother, what would you say were the types of leadership styles that most impressed you?
I think my mother's style would probably be more transformational than it was anything else. She was, my mom is very headstrong, which, people who have that type of skill, it could be, it's a double-edged sword. But she was very headstrong, but very, very good with relationships. She's very hands-on, even to this day. She turned 70 last year and continues to work to this day. But she was very hands-on, built some really wonderful relationships. So while she was transformational, she was a very relational type of leader, trying to show all the staff that we had how to do it. And if they weren't able to do it, she would jump in very quickly to show them. So my first experiences with leadership were watching her do her work in terms of leadership from that perspective. It was interesting to see her work at the little place we had where people would show up to eat, and see the relationships that she had, mingling with all the clients and spending time with them and getting to know them, asking them questions about their family and their friends and their work while serving them. So if I could wrap it all up and sum it all up, she was probably more of a servant leader than she was any other type of leader.
Well, it's interesting because when you look at leadership, there's so many different styles, and we've changed over the last, let's say, 30 to 50 years from a much more almost like a military kind of command and control style where people collaborate a lot more, work with each other more. It sounds like your mom was way ahead of her time.
She was, and interestingly, I saw that from both my parents. So my father was in the police force for 20 years perhaps. And the police force in Zambia is national. Think of it the same way it is up north with the Canadians. So it's a national police system that's broken down into provinces and down into the cities. And it was very interesting to watch my dad do his work as a policeman. Now, by the time I came up to an age where I could understand, my father had already moved from the police and gone into the Secret Service. And so his area was actually white-collar crime. He worked for a department called the Special Investigation Team for Economy and Trade. And so he did a lot of travel. And watching him become or be a leader in that environment was really interesting because it required a lot of collaboration. And so my experiences of leadership from both of them were really, really amazing. To see him do his work and talk to people and spend time with people, I was exposed to that from the time I was in primary school all the way through high school. So seeing them both work with people on a very personal level, on a very collaborative level, was very impressive to me. And those are the images I had of what leadership actually is. And that's generally the tone that I've taken in my own leadership.
So they were some of your early influences that got you into leadership. What did you actually major in school?
I took the long way to figuring out what my major was. In high school, I completed a drafting project and wanted to become a draftsman. So from 8th grade all the way to 12th grade, which in Zambia is considered high school, I did a drafting program, did multiple projects, drew the home that my parents had built. So it was really, really fun to go through that process, and I had this vision of becoming an architect. And so when I moved to Houston, I went to a school called North Harris College. The name has changed now to Lone Star College, North Harris. And when I went there, I was in the engineering, design, graphics, technology program. My hope was to finish my program there and then perhaps move off somewhere else to get my architecture degree. But then I took my first communication class, and that ruined everything. I discovered that I enjoyed dealing with people and working with people on a very personal level. And but even before I hit that point, I had changed majors multiple times, including a math major. I am definitely a nerd. Because I love math and I love chemistry. At one point I thought I'd be a chemical engineer. But I was encouraged by the people on campus to work through the process of figuring out what I really wanted to do and how best to manifest my strengths. And I found those strengths in communication and psychology. So my associate's degree was in liberal arts, focused on communication and psychology. My bachelor's is in communication with a minor in psychology. My plan at that point was to go in and get an organizational behavior degree directly, but I made a pit stop and got a business communication degree with focus on leadership and influence, and then finally worked on my doctoral degree, which is in applied management and decision sciences. And specifically, it's in leadership and organizational change, but my research focus and my research area is in understanding culture and leadership.
Oh, that's really interesting. And one of the things that I'm very impressed with in your work and also the books that you've written is the idea of the focused and sort of intentional way of forging relationships with an emphasis on loyalty and the quality of relationships. And I was wondering how that sort of ties to the area of decision sciences.
It's a really interesting field, decision sciences. If you were to look at the way degrees have changed over time, in fact, my degree has changed its name now. It's just a PhD, I say just, but it's a PhD in management. But even in that area where you focus on management, it's really the organizational development and design piece. So most companies and most organizations, that's how they put together their entire process. They look at it from the organizational behavior piece, Then they look at organizational development and design. So the development and design is, who gets into which positions, why do we put them there, what type of functional areas do we have, what structure do we have in the organization. And while those are all wonderful, and I think they're necessary because systems have a huge part in the way we all do what we do. But interestingly, I was listening yesterday to a broadcast by Gallup. Gallup is one of my favorite research centers. And one of the things that John Clifton said is that for the vast majority of human beings, they manifest their process, and they manifest their process and their purpose through their work. And so my interest in looking at organizations is in those behavioral pieces. I truly believe that behavior tends to determine the types of results we're going to get. And if behavior determines that, that's the one thing we actually can change. But we want to make sure, first of all, that people know what their strengths are, know what they're really good at. And in order for me to get to that point of having that conversation with them, I have to forge some version of a relationship with them. And I have to teach them and model for them that these relationships are absolutely valuable. But the only way to do that, obviously, is to get to know yourself. So interpersonal communication is what I'm generally known for in terms of the communication side. And so when people start to develop those interpersonal communication skills, they cannot do it without the intrapersonal skills, which is their ability to communicate within themselves and to really think on a deeper level. So decision sciences really is a collaborative process where you think within, but also you think out loud and you connect with other people. But if you don't have that internal piece, it really goes to waste.
Well, you said something I completely agree with, and that's if you don't know yourself, if you have no idea, you have no starting point, you need that foundational piece. What would you see as one of the biggest challenges today in, let's say, as an example, corporate America, where we have a large amount of different cultures, we've got different management styles, 4 or 5 generations working together. What do you consider the biggest challenge currently to create good leaders as well as to create people that are happy in what they do?
Well, I'm going to throw out a shameless plug. My current research is in an area that focuses on people being unapologetic. It happens to be the title of my next book. One of the things I've discovered is, as I work with clients, coast to coast and across the world, you start to realize that people tend to be uncomfortable with who they really are. And so that's normal for human beings because whenever we're put into a setting where we're around other people, and that social setting can be it can come with a lot of pressure to adapt, to conform. And so a lot of people are adapting and conforming. Now, that's not to say being able to adapt and to conform is a bad thing, but it is a bad thing when it's set against who I really am. There are certain gifts and skills that I have, that I bring, that in general nobody else can bring. And that's the same for every single person in the workplace. Most of the problems I find have nothing to do with the systems and so forth. The systems are very easy to fix because they tend to be, they're not really animated. When it comes to the organizational behavior piece, where I start to realize that the people I'm working with are absolutely individuals, but they're also extremely unique. I'll give you an example that most people would be able to relate to. I'm 38. My goddaughter is going to be 20 in August. The way she thinks is very different compared to the way I think, and yet she brings a lot of value to the conversations I have with her. Now, that's definitely a function of her maturity level, but ultimately I respect her even though she's a millennial, and I'm considered a Generation Xer. But when you look at that, I see value in what she brings, and I don't want her to be anything other than who she is. And because of that respect, a relationship is formed. And through that relationship, collaboration becomes a lot easier. So in the areas where I have gaps and I have a lack of understanding, she can come in. In the areas where she has gaps and a lack of understanding, I can come in. And it's a lot easier for us to have that when both people are open to having that conversation, when both people are open to the reality that we don't know everything. And so I think that's some of the challenge that we're seeing today in the workplace is everybody is pitting for, I've got it best, I've done it best. And as new generations come in, we always have this idea that, well, things didn't work out that way when I was your age. Well, that's the truth. They didn't work that way when they were our age, except the generation ahead of us said the same thing. So every generation, if you look at the research right now, every generation that comes in, the ones before it always talk with nostalgia about how things used to be. But interestingly, not everything that's in the past was great. And these young people that are coming in, they're supposed to bring in a vibrance to the way we live life. Now, I can completely agree that we do have some knuckleheads out there, but we also have them in my generation, we have them in my mother's generation, we have them everywhere. But we seem to isolate it for the millennials. And so as a person who's taught in the classroom working with these millennials, what they need most isn't someone to remind them about how different they are from us. Because the truth is, it's very easy for any person to show how two things are different. I think the strength is when a person can show up and actually show how two things are similar. And so it's about finding those similarities between the generations. And that's really the work that we tend to do, is to help our clients realize that every generation that they have in the workplace is a tool waiting to be used. They're an asset waiting to be unleashed. And unless the environment, unless the culture is created where people can openly and genuinely share what they see and what they view, you're constantly going to have clashes.
You know, it's funny. I remember reading once, and I can't remember if it was Plato or Socrates, but they had written something about, oh my gosh, this is the end of the world. The youth, it's horrible. They're lazy. They're good for nothing. And this is back in Plato's time. Some things never change. It sounds like what you're saying is it's the intersection of all the generations where we find that commonality, and there's a lot more commonality than people think.
I would agree. We talk about diversity all the time. We've been known for using words that most people won't use or have never used because they're just certain things I don't believe in. I personally do not believe in diversity, mostly because my nerdiness comes out and diversity means two. And if you look at our culture today, we don't have two cultures. We don't have two versities. We have multiversities.
Yep.
You look at my family, there's 9 of us. I've got, 2 amazing sisters and 6 smelly brothers, except every single one of us is different. And yet we come from the same culture, if you were to look at it from that perspective. We come from the same culture. But if you were to look at Zambia and consider it based on some of the metrics that are used today to determine diversity, if you looked at only the physical features, you would assume that everybody is the same, but a deeper look, a person will be able to discover that we're actually not the same. Zambia is slightly larger than Texas, 13 million people, is it 18 million people now, and 64 different languages. And so there's a lot of multiversity in that. But the one thing that keeps us together is our Zambian-ness. And I think that's the most important thing, is a lot of organizations now are beginning to realize that if they don't have a compelling vision, if they don't have a compelling purpose, they're not going to keep people unified. Because ultimately, you're going to have people with different opinions. And that's life. If I had everybody who thought the same way I did, I wouldn't want them around because somebody is going to become invaluable in the bad way. So I want people to come into our situations where they bring value that's different compared to mine. Because when you have a confluence of the same strengths, things usually don't work out well, because now we're competing against each other. Mm-hmm. But when you bring a confluence of different strengths, and then people recognize that there's a different way to do all these things, and yet if we're mission-driven, we can actually accomplish great things, it completely changes our attitude. Because now I appreciate myself for my value, but I also appreciate the value that other people bring as well.
Yeah, that's really good.
That's good.
I'm sorry, Susan, go ahead.
Oh, thank you. Well, really, I'm fascinated by the whole concept of unapologetic. And I think that, on the one hand, it's really provocative because I think sometimes in our social media-driven world, we invent and reinvent ourselves to create a sort of idealized avatar that creates a kind of, just an inner conflict or maybe even existential shame. So how do we actually figure out who we really are, and how do we keep from just apologizing for not being perfect or not fitting in with the latest media thing?
Chapter 2 of the textbook I've used for years in my interpersonal communication class really puts it together well. Dr. Stephen Beebe of Texas State University is the author, and it talks about communication in the self. One of the reasons I like communication is that it happens to be the one thing that transcends every field, from engineering all the way to nuclear physics. It completely transcends it because we have to have communication in order for us to get products, in order for us to get a process or anything great out to people, etc. But when you look at that, in that chapter, one of the things it talks about is when we're born, we have multiple questions. Naturally, this is a biological fact. We have multiple questions. And we're constantly asking, what's this new environment I'm in? Who are all these other people? But it's very difficult for us to understand each of those questions if we don't ask ourselves, well, who am I? And then, of course, who am I moves to why am I here? What am I doing? What's my purpose? And so when you use that word, existential, it's actually perfect, because ultimately what happens is I have to be able to reach a point where I realize that if I am not certain about who I am and what I want to do with my life and what my purpose is, then I model myself based on what other people say and what other people think, but often what other people feel as well. Our natural thought is to not rock the boat. We want to keep people as comfortable as possible because it's a deep psychological need for us to be liked. There isn't a person I have found yet that doesn't want to be liked. We all want to be liked. The challenge is, what price are we willing to pay to be liked? When we're a teenager, we're told, be very careful with peer pressure. Your friends will try to make you want to like them, and for you to feel like you need to be liked by them, don't do everything they do, etc. But it's no different when we're adults, because on our university campuses, in our corporate boardrooms, in our corporate hallways, and every other organization you could think of, it's the same. The idea is adapt or you don't fit in. And unfortunately, some of the best ideas are walking out of the door because people have not been given a chance to have a voice. And so we have to make a personal choice and a personal decision to be okay with who we are, regardless of what those circumstances might be, should we behave or act that way. And so on a personal level, I had to do the same thing. Every book that I write, I relate it, first of all, to myself, and I generally try to write the book to one person. And if I can get that one person connected, hopefully another 1,000, another million, whoever, however many we have, maybe reached out to. But I went through a period in my own life where I had to discover who I was. And I think that period probably started about 19 years ago when I moved from Zambia, 10,000 miles away from home. I had one friend and $2,000, and that was it, plus a dream. And so I had to make some choices at that point. And the one friend that I had was making choices that were contrary to who I knew I wanted to be. And so me and that friend were no longer friends. And at that point, it was just me. And so here I am in this big, bold, wonderful new world with no relationships that I could truly count on. And my $2,000 was running out very quickly because more than half of that had gone to school tuition. And so I had to discover who I was, and I had to ask myself, would I adapt and do like the others do? Or was I going to put myself in a position where I could be absolutely unique and be cared for and be in relationships with people based on my uniqueness? And fortunately, I found that on my college campus with some of the people I worked with, since I worked in admissions, but also some of the faculty members that were on board. They walked me through this process of reminding me that I had something very unique, and that uniqueness was valuable. And I think that's the one thing that doesn't happen very much today, because people want you to look a certain way. I bet even our listeners would say, well, he doesn't sound like he's from Zambia. And I always ask, well, what does sounding like from Zambia mean like? What does it look like? What does it mean? Or what is it? But we all have these ideas of how things should be. And so we try to put people into these neat boxes. That way they can fit into our reality. My job is always to shatter people's reality and bring them to the truth of a matter. Because I think in many ways reality is overrated, because oftentimes we build it on our own. And so on a corporate level, it's important for organizations to create a culture that says, you're unique, and that's wonderful. And I think the tech industry has done a wonderful job of ushering that in, where people don't have to wear ties. If they want to wear them, they may. People may wear shorts. Obviously, depends on the meeting that you're having, but ultimately, depending on a person's position, there are certain boxes they don't have to fit in as long as they produce certain results. And so I think that type of understanding is going to bring a lot of change into the organizational world. And being able to say, I'm not sorry for being me. You know, I can't change this accent that I have. It just is. And as long as you can understand me, that's all that matters. The rest we can figure out. We can figure out more things that we have in common if we allow people to just be themselves rather than try to transform them and allow them to fall into these neat boxes that we've created for them.
You know, that's an absolutely great point. I remember we do a lot of e-learning and development, and in one of the courses we did, or actually several, quite a few, we've done inclusion and diversity training. And after doing it, I'm analyzing the training, thinking we're actually separating people by a lot of these courses. We're not including them. We're not encouraging diversity. We're encouraging silos of people who think they're being diverse or think they're being included, but everybody's in their own little group. I go, how does anybody win from that one? And I see a lot of that in corporate America, which rather than unite us more, now we're all going to work to be different, but different in our own silo. I don't get that. Have you run into that?
I have. Excuse me. I have, and it's very interesting. You know, silos are a normal part to me. They're a normal part of a person who does not know who they are. A person who's threatened by the fact that other people are better than them. So as an athlete, I know what my strengths are. You know, people say, you know, former athletes. I don't think a person is ever a former athlete. They're just an athlete who's aged. But all things together, you look at all these different people, I recognize that as a basketball player, if I'm on the floor, depending on us, the game we're playing, if we're playing a regular 5-on-5 basketball game, the 4 other players have very, very specific roles to play, just like I have a very specific role to play. But I don't get separated from them because my position is different. You know, the traditional thought is that you have a point guard, a shooting guard, a small forward, a power forward, and a center. If you look at each of those positions, and if they all said, well, this is my job and this is all I do and that's all I'm going to do, the team wouldn't gel very well. The team wouldn't function very well. And I think we tend to do that as well in the corporate scene. Well, I am in accounting. I don't have to worry about that. I'm a driver. I don't have to worry about that. I have a client that we're working with, and we're introducing this cultural shift all across their locations over the across the U.S. And a few weeks ago, I was taking care of the group that's out in New York, New Jersey, and Boston. And we had that conversation. And so you have directors and managers in the training, you have drivers, you have customer service folks, you've got salespeople, and we had to go through this process of getting them to see that it really doesn't matter who ultimately gets the credit as long as the customer is happy. That means every person has to realize their value. And I asked them, what would happen if the drivers decided they would not deliver the product? And at that point, it wouldn't matter how good the customer service representative was, or how great the salesperson was, or how good the people who were collecting the money were. If the product's not delivered, it really doesn't matter. And I think that mentality right there is about us breaking silos. Now, I don't believe in open office concepts because I get distracted fairly easily. But when it comes to breaking silos, you know, yes, we have to have functional areas because things need to be taken care of. But we have to realize that we need each other more than we don't. Because if one portion of us doesn't work, it changes everything. And I think organizations, because they are living and breathing, at least in the U.S., you know, my company has a social security number, it pays taxes, they're living and breathing. But when people start to see their organization as a body, you know, if you've ever stubbed your toe, you know that it's one of the smallest parts of your body. And yet a stubbed toe can ruin everything, right? A jammed finger, a cuticle out of place. It's amazing how those little things, they can create such a bad irritation for the rest of the body. And that's the same way for organizations, is the little guy. You know, we live in Texas. The high today was mid-80s, maybe almost 90, and the humidity was ridiculously high. The one person that I really like in the summer is the guy that makes sure that the AC is working. And it's amazing how that has nothing necessarily to do with sales. But if I have to work in an office that, because of being inside, is 100 degrees and 170% humidity, it wouldn't be a good day. So I think a lot of it is just watching that perspective and realizing that we need each other more than we actually realize, and that each person has a very specific role to play.
I think that's a great way to end this show. We're about at the end of our time. Susan always has a very good question to ask, so I'm going to let her finish up the show with you. And thank you so much. That was actually very good. Really enjoyed the concepts, and I know Susan's been deep in thought. She's been very quiet.
I've been fascinated. It's been really, really great. And so, yes, I do have a final question, and it has to do with the title of our show, which is Life Edge. So, Kozhi, I would like to ask you, what in your life has given you an edge?
What has given me an edge? That's probably going to be the hardest question I answer today, because I have to do it in about 60 seconds. I think the thing that's given me a great edge is how I began. It's interesting that in Zambian culture we have a line that says "ukutangulira tekufika," meaning the first one off the starting line isn't the one that ends up finishing the race. But one of the things I've discovered is that I was given such an amazing foundation, and I have found that, to me, that foundation is a better predictor of success going forward, however you define success. And I have been given a great edge because I learned early in life who I was, what was important, and what I needed to do to attain whatever goals I had in front of me. One of my favorite quotes is by H. Jackson Brown, and he says, "In the confrontation between the rock and the stream always wins, not by strength, but by perseverance." And I was taught very early how to persevere, how to be put in a tough situation, the proverbial rock in a hard place, and still be able to make a decision that I could live with past whatever the consequences were. And so I was very fortunate to grow up in a country where I had parents who had this strong view of what success was, but also what was expected of me. There wasn't a time where I didn't know what was expected of me. In fact, I was reminded constantly about what was expected of me. But I was very fortunate to learn how to persevere. And honestly, that's how I made, technically that's how I spun $2,000, a return ticket, into the life that I have today, was being able to have that perseverance. So, when I think of Life Edge, I think of my best friend Darnell, who always reminds me that, if you're not living life on the edge, you're taking up too much space. And so, to me, living on the edge, that's what you do. You do everything that you can to overcome, regardless of what the circumstances might be.
I love that. It's very, very inspiring. And just the fact that you looked at yourself in the mirror and you said, okay, I have $2,000 and I've got to make this work. And you weren't afraid. Or maybe you were afraid, but then you basically said, I don't care that I'm afraid, I'm going to make it work anyway. That's great.
Thank you.
Kozhi, before we wrap up, are you giving any talks, any webinars, any seminars, anywhere where you'll be presenting? And you mentioned a new book is coming out. So what's coming up soon in your life?
We have a very interesting situation. 3 of my books are being republished by Tate Publishing, so they'll be up on our website here pretty soon, as well as on our social media outlets. But the next book in line for me is a book entitled Unapologetic, and it really does talk about us finding our strengths and then exploiting them as best as we can. Most of my work this year is for private events, but we have a few things in the works for us to do some public events where we'll be able to open things up. But my next speaking engagement is actually speaking at a graduation in Fort Worth, Texas. So I'll be speaking at 2 graduations there next month. So that's exciting because I get to wear my cap and gown, and I have a really cool hat. Makes me look really smart. So I'm excited about that.
Do you have one of the puffy hats that has a little tassel?
Yes, ma'am. That would be it. I feel like I went to Oxford because most of the people at Oxford, that's what they wear.
I like that.
Great. Well,
Thank
we
you.
are at the end of our show. Thank you so much for coming on, Kozhi. We really appreciate it. I think that was very good information for a lot of people. And definitely buy his new book and his old ones while you're at it. Are they at Amazon too, by the way?
Yes, sir, they are. So if you just search for my name on a Google search, you should be able to access them.
That's great. If you're watching the show, we are on Vimeo at vimeo.com/channels/lifeedge. We look forward to seeing you there. And you can watch the live stream we just did on YouTube after the fact. So if you missed the live show, you can always watch it later. Thanks again, everyone. Thanks, Susan. And again, thank you, Kozhi, for being there. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Susan and
Thank
Rick.
you.
Have a good day.
You too. And we'll see you all
Thank
next
you.
week. Have a good
Great
one,
job.
everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.